Okay, so I'll just quickly introduce both of you and then we can get right into the questions. So thanks everyone for joining this panel today. We're going to be talking about what makes a great mentoring relationship, the benefits and challenges of a mentoring relationship, how to structure your meetings, set expectations, things like that. I really want to welcome Darcy and Noelle for joining us today. Darcy is a global executive with over 25 years of international leadership and business development experience in Asia Pacific, Europe, the Middle East and Africa, and the US with organizations such as Ogilvy, Thomson Reuters, American Express, Impact, and Imperial Global. She has had several senior roles with responsibilities in strategy, P&L, partnerships, product development, as well as managing global, culturally diverse matrix teams. Darcy holds a Master's of Public and International Affairs with concentrations in Chinese Studies and Diplomacy, as well as a BA in Liberal Arts and Chinese Studies, both from Pitt. She is also a certified Designing Your Life coach and will be launching her business Unstuck in March 2021. Noelle is a mixed methods researcher pursuing her PhD in Behavioral and Community Health Sciences at the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public Health. She earned her Master's of Science in Gender, Policy, and Inequalities at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Prior to beginning her doctoral work, Noelle worked as a clinical research assistant conducting mixed methods research centered around such topics as substance use in pregnancy and the opioid epidemic. So thank you both so much for joining, and we'll just get right into the questions. So this is for both of you. What do you feel are some of the greatest benefits and challenges in a mentoring relationship? Yeah, we can start with Darcy.
Great. Well, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to participate. Really happy to be here on a very important subject. Mentoring is really true and dear to my heart. So I do a lot of it. So really happy to be here. Thank you. So I'd say as far as benefits, I think, we're in a really special time right now with COVID and a lot of challenges. There's a lot of complexity and it's a changing business world right now. And I think that right now is a really great time to forge a mentorship relationship to help navigate these complexities. So I would say mentors are really helpful for providing knowledge. They can be objective. They can provide feedback. We tend to, I'm guilty of this too. You kind of tend to stay with your family, your friends, your professors, kind of getting feedback from them. And it's really nice. A mentorship relationship is really good to get an objective, unbiased opinion and ideas in a very safe environment and confidential environment. I think it also gives the mentee an opportunity to learn from the mentor's mistakes. Sadly, I've made quite a few, so I'm quite happy to share my mistakes, and hopefully the mentee can glean some information from that. So, and I think that mentors, and for myself and how I try to mentor, is opening up doors if it's possible for mentees. And I think that's a really a wonderful benefit for a mentee. And lastly, I think it's really important to note that it's free. So, so quite honestly, if I was given, when I was undergrad, just graduated, a free resource to help me as I develop my career, by golly, I would have taken it. So I think it's free opportunity. So, and then I think sort of the challenges, I'd say, I don't think there's a lot of challenges except for just having the interest for both parties and that energy to keep the mentorship relationship going. I think you have to really be committed to that. So yeah, those are my benefits and not too many challenges, I'd say.
Thanks, Noelle.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me as well. I've had a really great experience with my mentor, Mark, and I'm happy to chat about it. So I agree with Darcy on all of her points. I have my little notes written here, and one of the biggest benefits I agree to was having that objective observer. Mentors I've had in the past, the mentors I have now, have all been very open and invested in my career, but not as much, as you said, as my parents or my friends or someone else who will also give opinions, but those opinions are based on also what they want our collective lives to look like versus just my own. So I think that's been very helpful to me. It's also been helpful to me to learn from their perspective and experience. Especially I have mentors from a whole swath of different backgrounds and interests because I have a lot of different interests. That's been very helpful to have a diverse group. Also having the opportunity to work through my questions. So not just coming to a meeting and just asking direct questions, but really working through like all of the questions or all of the aspects of different things, such as negotiating a salary or things like that. Really being able to like hit all of the points and even some things that I didn't think about. I think that those have been the most valuable conversations when I'm surprised by new information. And in terms of challenging things, I agree. There hasn't been that much. The biggest things are scheduling, as Darcy said, making sure you have that shared interest and the shared time to have to build this relationship. And for me, also figuring out what exactly to ask from each mentor, because as I said, they're coming from different backgrounds and have different skills. So when I'm identifying people, and even in my doctoral work, when I'm identifying my committee, which is also a type of mentor, what am I asking people for? What part of their expertise will be most helpful? Because then that helps them to know what part of themselves to bring to the table.
So kind of a follow-up to that, what have either of you encountered a situation where, if either Noelle as a mentee, like you've asked a question of your mentor that they don't really know how to answer, or they might not have the expertise in, kind of what happens in that situation? Do they introduce you to someone else, or how have either of you handled that if you've encountered that?
Yeah, so I have encountered that a bit in terms of trying to do global work in School of Public Health. And especially the work that I'm interested in doing is more centered around menstrual health and that field, which we do have people working on, but it is much lesser focus in our school. And when I brought that up to my mentors, both formal and informal, they have been really great actually in connecting me to organizations and groups, often abroad, that do this work and really set the groundwork for my networking relationships there. And then that allowed me to launch into different fields and sort of snowball from there. So definitely that's something I look for in mentors too, is that willingness to, if I don't have the answer, direct me towards someone who does.
Yeah, I thank you, Noelle. I would echo what you've said. From the other side of it, being a mentor is, I certainly, if I don't know the answer, make suggestions, offer some ideas, make some connections, and so forth. So, we can't be expected to know everything. I've got a pretty good business acumen and broad sense of things related to strategy, and as you shared, Karen, in the introduction, P&L and so forth and so on. But if it's an expertise that I lack, I'm not afraid to say it. I can't know everything, but I certainly can make some suggestions and some connections, and happy to always do that to make sure that the mentee gets out of the relationship what they need.
Okay, awesome. Thank you both. So what makes a mentor, quote unquote, good? Darcy, maybe we can start with you.
What makes a mentor good? I would say, echoing what I said before, I think it's having that dedication and commitment to the relationship. I'd say that's the first and foremost thing. A mentor should have a desire to help others and to really help them achieve their goals and aspirations. As I shared just a moment ago, I think it's also important that the mentor has some business acumen. Oftentimes, I think properly related to Noelle, it's very specific to an industry. I have more of a broad range of skill set that I'm able to provide. So, for example, my background's in sales and marketing, as you highlighted. I work globally. I've worked in different cultures. I've worked in sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think if I'm able to find a good match with someone, that's a pretty broad range of experience and skills. And so I think it's really important if I can, as a mentor, can use that and leverage those skills. And so I think that makes me good. I think it's also important that the mentor has really good listening skills. good questioning skills. I don't like to be one doing all the talking. I like to tease out a lot and share and impart some information, but really, I'm not really sure if I have the percentage of how much people should speak, but I wouldn't imagine I would be doing most of this questioning. This is me speaking, I'd be doing a lot of the questioning. I think also a mentor should be really comfortable with providing this frank feedback, but being very empathetic also. This is a confidential relationship, and so you have to exercise that confidentiality. So yeah, and trust building I think is really important. So those are the things that I would say would be make a good mentor. Probably more, but that's enough for now.
Thanks, Darcy. Yeah, Noelle, from your perspective as a mentee.
Yes, I mean, I would agree with all of those. I feel that best mentors are very open to, while yes, they will share an interest with you, also openness to new ideas and to new ways of looking at things. That's something I've really appreciated with my current mentors, that we're really learning from each other. And this is, the mentoring relationship gives them an opportunity to think about their careers differently as well. So it's not just a one way of how am I benefiting, it's also, it's a feedback. So I think being open to that experience is really important. A willingness to share, as Darcy said, sharing your highs and your lows of your career, I think is important. It's, all of those can be teaching moments. Also having the ability to discuss without providing concrete answers, at least for me, that's worked quite well. I don't go into these conversations thinking that they're going to tell me what I should do. They're just talking about more what I can do and what I could do, and teasing out, what that could look like. And that's been really helpful for me. But I think it's also important to be aware as a mentor that not every mentee is going to work that way. And being able to work with different personality types and learning styles and adapt that.
Very awesome. So what kinds of things do you expect from your mentee or mentor? And how do you set those expectations?
Yeah, so for me, probably one of the most important is really around the logistics of it. I feel that this mentorship relationship should be driven from the mentee. I feel very strongly about that. I'm working full time. I've got, as a mentor, I've got a lot of commitments, got kids, got a job, volunteering, all kinds of fun stuff. So I think that it's really on the mentee to drive this relationship. So that would be, booking the appointment, showing up on time, setting the agenda, and so forth, and really driving it. So I'd say that respect is something that I appreciate from a mentee. I think this drive to advance their career, being really keen, and I like the goal setting, but it doesn't have to be a super concrete goal, because oftentimes part of the reason that you want to have a mentor is that you want to work on your goal setting, but really understanding, what do you want to get out of the relationship? Yeah, I like what Noelle just said. I'm not here to give you the answers specifically. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but just sort of being open to these kinds of possibilities. Also having some self-awareness. We all have strengths and maybe challenging attributes or weaknesses, if you like. And so sort of having that kind of self-awareness. So those would be the things I'd say that I would expect from a mentee. And I do think, though, the relationship is quite fluid, so it can change and it changes shape. So when I say about goals, it can change. It can change from one conversation to the other. But I think just having that motivation to move forward and advance and be committed is really important.
Yes, I echo all of that. I think also, I think Darcy, you mentioned this before too, creating that non-judgmental environment, I think for me is key. And having open lines of communication, that's really what has worked well for me, because when I was thinking of the different formal and informal mentoring relationships I have, the communication looks so different depending on the person. And that's been really important for us, actually, because some folks have different capacities at this time to be more involved, some less. Sometimes that's changed, especially with mentors that I've worked with before. we would meet maybe weekly, bi-weekly when I was there all the time, but now that I'm not, we're meeting less frequently, but that doesn't mean they're less invested. It just means that it looks different. And that when we have meetings, you're bringing maybe a bit more to the table than you would have if you're meeting weekly. So I think just having that flexibility and that communication is what I expect most from mentors, and also just having that interest and being honest if perhaps they need to step back, I think too is important.
Yeah, I think both of you brought up really good points. I mean, especially I feel like with the pandemic, it's kind of brought out like a complete restructuring of our schedules and all that stuff, and for people to just give each other grace and understanding, and and be open about your time. So kind of along the same lines, how would you recommend mentors and mentees structure their meetings? I mean, I know both of you said the goals can change and be a bit fluid, but as far as like length of time, how long you meet, how often you meet, do you create a long-term plan, or is it really like meeting to meeting? It kind of just depends on what you want to talk about. Yeah, what are your suggestions for that?
Noelle, why don't you go first? I keep going first. So why don't you go first this time? So I can say I can echo what Noelle says.
Sure. I mean, honestly, it depends on the people. What you want the structure to look like. For me, 1-hour meetings work really well. But part of that is because I like to talk. So I think it depends on the person and how much you like to talk and how much of your relationship is really parsing out things, because that is going to take longer. I have also found it to be helpful to have those long-term plans, but again, that's because I like to think in the long term. And as I said before, I think it's important as a mentor to adapt to the needs of your mentee and vice versa. And some folks don't like to plan long term, and that's completely okay too. But for me, what's worked best is, at least with the most formal mentors I have now, we meet either weekly or bi-weekly for an hour. And we do have a plan that's generally centered around some topic, which can change, just so that we're coming there with an intention. So even if it's not we don't really do agendas or anything, I think that could be helpful for some. But for my mentors, it's been more helpful to just have a kind of topic we're coming with, or maybe a document that you're talking about. So you're setting the intention before and not having to go through the document or anything during the meeting necessarily, so that you're really reserving that time for conversation. But again, that's because that's how I work through things best.
Yeah, so for me, as a mentor, I would say it depends on the shape of the relationship, very similar to what Noelle was saying, and where the person is. And are they a new graduate? Are they changing jobs? Are they having challenges with their boss or other relationship issues? It can be a myriad of reasons why they want to be in a mentoring relationship. So taking that into consideration, the first thing I would say is usually the first call, I like it to be 90 minutes, because I think that you unravel a lot about personal stuff, and education and all kinds of things that you need to sort of get your arms around in order to understand each other, and sharing. And then my preference is, it varies, but normally mine are usually, and I'm doing a lot across time zones. So usually I do about monthly. That's when, not as frequent, maybe fortnightly, but usually it's monthly. And the meetings usually last for about 60 minutes, as similar to what Noelle said. And then the relationship, it tends to run usually about 6 months. And I would say, because usually someone's coming because they need a mentor, because they're at a inflection point in their life and they need some help doing something, whether it's looking, they're in the job search, or some of the things I said earlier, changing jobs or having a relationship challenge with their boss and negotiating something, what have you. And so I agree with what Noelle said. We don't really have a set agenda. It's sort of a document we maybe work off a Google Doc and as such. But usually about a month seems about right for me, because then it gives people time to implement and to think about it and to come back to the table with some new, like, I tried this and I tried that, and that didn't work and this was good. And normally it's about 6 months, I would say. And I'll use an example. I mentored a woman in Latin America, and she and I she's in Mexico, and we spent 6 months together monthly, and we emailed each other, and we did a lot of ad hoc conversations also, because she was in the job search mode. So we did a lot of that. But then after 6 months, she got a job, and then things kind of changed shape a little bit. And then it became sporadic. It was like every now and then. And that changed the relationship. I wouldn't say it was more mentoring. It was just more maybe coaching or periodically reaching out to me. And that was for, that continues on, and it's been years that she'll go, hey, I need help with something. But for me, it's usually monthly for about 6 months, pretty hard and steady. And then it sort of can peter off depending on the needs.
Have either of you had a mentoring relationship that didn't work out, that, maybe it wasn't a good fit, for whatever reason, it didn't work out and you kind of had to part ways? And how did you go about handling that situation? I don't know if Noelle, you want to start, if you have experienced that.
I was trying to think, honestly, I don't believe that I have yet had someone who is mentoring me not work out. When I have mentored students, there have been some moments where we've had to part ways, and it was never negative. It's just really recognizing when, like, there are limits to how much you can help someone if it's out of your expertise, and also really, for me, and I know I'm here as the mentee, but just like to switch it up a little bit. When I have been mentoring students, what I realized when I went into that and was kind of thrust into that role, loved it, but I realized there's certain ways of being a mentor that kind of can start to stick with you, and some people won't map onto those. So for instance, I'm someone who works better with people who are very self-motivated. I'm not very good at being a helicopter person, and things like that. And really, it forced me to recognize what I can provide and what I can't really provide. And so in those instances, it sort of petered off because of that, because I couldn't be the person that they needed me to be. And that was completely fine. There are tons of other people with expertise who are more well suited to that type of relationship.
Yeah, I would echo what Noelle said. I've mentored many people in my long career. It maybe is a little more than 25 years, if I'm honest, Karen. But anyway, that was an old CV bio that was a little bit old. But I would say, I think it's usually around time commitment and or just commitment. It goes back to the very first thing that I said, what are the benefits, or what makes a successful mentoring relationship? And I think it's really important that you're both committed. And I've had a few over, a span of a long time that, didn't show up, or like change the appointment. And then actually for me as a mentor, I kind of go in stride, and I'm like planning, and I've set the time aside, and I've been thinking about it, and I've given that time. And so my commitment is there. But when I get the appointments canceled multiple times and changed, and then, it's kind of silence, then, it's like, well, and that means a start over every time you have the conversation, if there's been a large gap. And I find that's a bit, that can be a bit frustrating on both sides. So that just goes back to what I said earlier. I think you really have to be committed, and you really want to get something out of it. And it might not be the right time. It might be, this isn't the right time for you to hunker down and to focus on this relationship. It might be another time. So yeah, so I've had that happen, not a lot, but a few times. Yeah.
Thanks. And I just want to mention for the attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function, and we can get to those questions at the end. So this question is for both of you as well. What types of questions do you like to ask in the very first meeting as a mentor and as a mentee?
Do you want me to go? I can take that one. Yeah. So I can go first here. So for me, the first ones are all about chemistry. Kind of going back to what Noelle was saying, just really understanding the person. I'm going to get an idea of their background, education, and so forth. So and their ambitions and what they want to get out of this relationship. So the questions really are specifically on getting to know each other. I can't think of specific questions per se, but it's just like a chemistry meeting, if you like, and to sort of see if this is the right relationship for both of us.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same, and it also helps to start to set some expectations too during that meeting as well, mostly around logistics, but also, I mean, some of that is around, like Darcy was saying, what happens if you need to cancel last minute or things like that. So not just logistics, but also like how you're creating a respectful relationship, and that sort of groundwork, I think, also happens during that first meeting. And yes, also deciding if this is someone you'd like to work with. I tend to prefer longer term mentors too. So that's something that's in the back of my mind as well, is like, how do we work now, and also how might we work in a year or 5 years, that sort of thing, because that's what I'm looking for.
So this question is for Noelle, and Darcy, actually, you can, if you've been a mentee before, you can also answer, but what are some of the most meaningful pieces of advice you've ever received from a mentor? Something that's really stuck with you and helped you, long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think there've been quite a lot, but I thought of a couple to share. So the first one is really about, and again, this is rather specific to how I see my career panning out, so it wouldn't be applicable to everyone, but really being willing. One of my mentors said, the importance of being sort of a chameleon, or he calls it the Madonna effect. So being willing to change, and reinvent yourself at every kind of juncture. Because I see myself having a career that is rather mobile, in a lot of ways, and is very internationally focused, et cetera. That reinvention piece is really important to me. So really, he was really reminding me that it's important to keep that front of mind. Like, if that's your goal, like really keep that in focus. Also, something that I found interesting was the idea of continuing to interview. So even if you're secure and happy in a role, or in a trajectory, continuing to put yourself out there, see what's out there. Even if you don't have an intention to leave, it's still helpful to not grow stagnant in those skills, and also to see, like, for instance, if your salary is on par, if the roles are different in different industries. So really just continuing to look at what's out there so that you don't accidentally get siloed. And also being very aware of what you can learn from each opportunity, whether that's a job or a volunteering opportunity. Just really thinking very critically about what you can take away from every opportunity, including what you can give, but also, like, even if it wasn't a great experience, or even if it was, like, what am I walking away with? What skills do I have, transferable or not? Like, how was that valuable?
I don't think I have much to add. I think I echo everything that Noelle had shared. So yeah, I think that when I've been working with a mentor, it was the same kinds of scenarios and the same kind of things that I learned.
Awesome. So, I mean, Noelle and Darcy, do either of you currently have a mentor? And if so, can you talk about how you developed this relationship and how it has supported you in your career?
Sure. So I do have a sort of mentorship network, I suppose. So I do have 3 formal mentors, and most of them, one is through this program actually, and then 2 are through my school. We have advisors that are assigned to us through GSPH, but those, which don't have to be mentorship relationships, of course, because there is a difference between an advisor and a mentor, but those have both converted to be more mentorship relationships, especially as I've approached my dissertation. So while those were given to me in some aspect, we've really chosen to grow those relationships past what they needed to be on paper, because really logistically it just had to be sort of a check the box sort of relationship. But we've chosen to stay together and really figure out how best to shape my career as a group. So the formal mentorships have looked like that. And then informal, it's kind of been all over the place. I mean, one of my informal mentors is, I mean, a lot of them I consider friends too. and they're friends first at this point. But one of them, I met when I was fresh out of college and moved to DC without a job, and met her through networking, and she actually got me my first job ever. So while we're friends now, and she's only a couple years older than me, I still check in with her periodically and will bounce ideas for my career off of her, because she's 5 years ahead of me, and has always been very open about things like salary and what you should be expecting from your employers and things like that. And I have a few other mentors who have followed it's a similar structure, that we are 100% friends first, but we do have conversations that are very focused on career, because I admire what they've done in their careers, and they're close enough to me in age that it's very relevant, but they're ahead of me in career. So I can really learn from their path. Yeah.
So I don't currently have a mentor, but I have throughout my professional career. My most recent one that I still have a relationship with, but it's not a formal mentoring relationship right now. I had heard her speak at a conference, and I was like, wow, really impressive, thoughtful, insightful, and I thought, I could learn a lot from her. So I didn't know her. She was a speaker at a 500 person conference. So I thought, well, I've got gumption, so why not just ping her on LinkedIn? And so I did. And I said, look, I really enjoyed your presentation and some of your insights. Would you be willing to be my mentor? And so that's how I found working with her. And similar to what Noelle had said, I had her for a couple of years, and it was at different junctures in the career stage where I was, sort of looking at one way or looking at another, and got some good insights and spent a lot of time with her. So she's provided me, with some support in that respect. And, I think, I have a network also of, as Noelle said, as I'm more mature, I've got in age, I've got quite a broad range of people who have had experience across a lot of different industries and geographies. So I also tap into them. They're like friends. I don't know if I'd say mentors, but they can give me a lot of feedback. But, I think that in any stage of your career, whether you're in the beginning stages, middle, or towards the end of your career, you can certainly benefit from this relationship. And in fact, funny enough, I just spoke with her about 3 weeks ago. So I had a conversation with her. She's like, I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm like, yeah, well, I need you now. And you have some time. So between speaking engagements. So yeah.
All right, awesome. And this question is specifically for Darcy. As a Pitt alum, can you reflect maybe on your experience at Pitt and why you want to help Pitt students as an alum of the university?
Sure. So I actually did both my undergrad and graduate work at Pitt. I transferred. I went to a small liberal arts college in Ohio for 2 years, and nothing against Ohio, but I went back to Pitt. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and the reason that I went to Pitt was for the diversity and diversity of thought, diversity of cultures, experience. I was in quite a homogeneous liberal arts school in Ohio, in a farming town, and it was really nice to go to Pitt where there was just so much debate and discussion, and it really, I have to say, it was really the cornerstone of my education. And that went from undergrad, and I went to DC for a couple of years and came back and went to GSBA, to Graduate School of Public International Affairs, and found the same. And in that respect, then we included also a lot of international students in respect to that. So I had people from Saudi Arabia and European countries and Asia. So for me, that's something that Pitt has always given me, is this really diverse voices. And sometimes I don't agree with them, but actually they're very thought-provoking. And it's always, I think, really interesting to listen to other people's opinions and be curious and ask these kinds of questions and challenge them, like why. So it's part of that learning process. So when I was at Gispia, I did a work study and I was in the career services department. I worked, I had a couple hours in there with a gentleman. He was head of career services at the time. His name's John McAllister. He's since passed away, but really an inspirational person to me. So I was able to listen into a lot of conversations about careers, and a lot of the students at Gispia were interested in going to DC. I know, Noelle, I think you said you were at Gispia, or you went to DC, I went to DC. And so people, that tends to be the trajectory. People are going to DC or, public policy and such. But I was really focused on the international affairs part of it. I really thought, I've got this degree in international affairs. I want to go overseas. I didn't want to stay in Pittsburgh, and I just wanted some global experience. And so at the time, and it was before the internet, so let's just get that out there. So I did not have anybody that really could help me that much. There were a lot of people that were in development work, but I didn't want to go into development work necessarily. I wasn't sure, but I didn't study development. So I really wanted to go and get some business experience. So I had a lot of books and as such, but it was all on my own back, if you like. I bounced ideas off of people at Gispia and professors. Dr. Goldstein was my mentor and guide and counselor there, and spent a lot of time asking professors, but I just didn't have that kind of support. So to answer your question, that was a bit long-winded, but to answer your question is that now that I have had 25 odd years, I've lived longer outside of the US than I have inside the US. I've worked in 6, 7 different countries. I'm now living in France, just across the border from Switzerland, from Geneva. And I feel that I can give back to all of the things that I got from Gispia, and the things that, and to Pitt, and to the things that I didn't maybe have at that time. I mean, now you can get all that information on the internet. That's easy, but but I think, I have real life experience, and I think I can give that back to help other people and mentor them and support them if they're looking at more international business careers.
Very awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I want to make sure we get this question from the audience. So Steph asks, what is the best way to reach out to someone you are interested in being mentored by? And are both of you open to being mentors to students?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Steph. So I think reaching out to people that you're interested in being mentored by, it can look so different, but I agree with something Darcy said. Like I have also done that, like sort of zeroed in on a person at a conference and been like, yep, I want that. So and just sort of went for it. And people are more open to that than you might think. I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but I have yet to have that backfire. Sometimes it turns out that, like, yes, they are really interesting, but it's not actually a relationship that's going to work, and that's totally fine. Like after a conversation or something, you realize that, okay, yes, we have this one interest that I saw on display, but really this wouldn't have any staying power. But even if that happens, you still made a new contact, and that's always helpful. But I think just my advice would be just go for it. Like if you see someone that you have a connection to, obviously it's helpful if you can get a warm handoff, especially if you are completely out of their network. So if you do have someone who is, like, for instance, if this is a Pitt alum that you're interested in, and there's someone who maybe you both know in a class, or there's a professor that might know them too, it could be helpful to get that warm handoff. But also I think people are open, especially during COVID now, to sort of more unconventional situations where you might get an email from someone, and since we're looking for connection right now anyway, that could be interesting. So all of that is to say, just go for it if there's someone that you find interesting, and try to have that first conversation, and the worst thing that they can say is no, or I don't have time right now, and like check back. And then in terms of mentorship of students, yes, I am always happy to mentor students if I can be of help. I really enjoy working with other students.
Thanks, Noelle. Darcy?
Yeah, beautifully said, Noelle. I agree with you. And I think in particular, because of COVID time, people have a lot more free time or a lot more time in their day. They're not doing the commute and as such. And so, so now I'd say is a really great time to reach out to people and have a virtual relationship with them. So, yeah, so that's how I found people most of the time. And, again, I didn't have any kind of, I haven't been in a formal, I have been a mentor in a formal mentoring relationship, but I've not been a mentee in a formal mentor relationship. Yeah, say that fast 3 times. And so, and as is such, I think that, speaking to whomever who's in, doing interesting work that you're keen to have a conversation with is really critical. And I think what Noelle said is, it might just be a coffee and, hey, what you're doing is really interesting. And then that might not go further than a mentoring relationship, but I think you need to be curious enough and ask the right questions and, and be receptive to that. And hopefully, you can find your right mentor. And as for me, the same as what Noelle shared, I'm open to mentoring. I'm mentoring a couple of people right now, and I'm always open to mentoring other young people and students. Yeah, I really enjoy that.
All right, thanks to you both. Quick plug, if you haven't joined the Pitt Commons platform yet, I would definitely encourage anyone here to join. It's pretty much like LinkedIn, but just for people in the Pitt network. So it's nice because, you already have that connection where either they're an alum or they're a current student or a staff or faculty. So there's not, you already have, some point in common. So if you haven't joined the Pitt Commons platform yet, I would definitely try that. And it's pretty easy because it can sync up to your LinkedIn. So that way you can just import all of your info from LinkedIn and you don't have to retype it. So yeah, if you are looking for a mentor or just to network and connect with more people, I would definitely check out Pitt Commons. Okay, we have another question. I want to develop a mentoring program in my organization. So I guess this is from someone who would potentially be a mentor. Is there a formal structure I can follow? That's tough. I don't know if Darcy, you might have any insight.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked in companies that have, and I've worked in consulting and leadership development, and have worked with companies who have mentoring programs. So yeah, I mean, there is, I think a couple of things, and I'm sorry, I can't think of a whole structure for you right now on this call, but certainly, do you want it to be, are you looking at maybe new grads? Is it across the board within the whole organization? Is it women that you're looking to mentor? Is it a whole organizational kind of mentoring program? So I think, just understanding who the demographic is really important. And then kind of going back to what we said before too, is that, when you're doing that matching, you want to make sure that match and that the people that are the mentors are committed. It's very different when you work with somebody. Of course, now we're virtual, but if they're not showing up and they work in your organization, it makes it a little bit awkward. So, so you want commitment from both sides. And usually for corporate mentoring programs, there tends to be a very a beginning and an end kind of date. It usually kick off with a cohort, and it will start, and it will be quite structured, and there'll be a lot of feedback, and that might even pull in a manager. Possibly, it might not. It could pull in a manager and so forth. But then there's usually a beginning, middle, and an end to that kind of scenario. And then you get a new cohort of mentors and mentees. So, but yes, the answer to your question is that there's certainly structured programs that you can expand on within your own organization. I'm happy to share some ideas and point you in the right direction.
Great, thanks, Darcy. I don't know if Noelle, you had anything to add, maybe something you would look for if you were part of a more formal structure in an organization.
I mean, I have not experienced that in an organization. I do think that it would have been nice, though, especially in the organizations I've been a part of outside of, because I was a researcher for a while, and that's different. It's just a different structure than a lot of other workplaces. But prior to that, in the more kind of corporate or larger nonprofit space that could definitely be helpful, especially for, like Darcy was saying, new grads. At the time, I was like a completely new graduate. And that's when, as I said, I met the one woman that I consider both a friend and informal mentor who really took me under her wing and was the first person to really introduce me to the fact that, yes, in fact, you should be talking about your salary with your friends. Like, that is important. And things like that, that I think would be helpful for new grads. So that's something that I would love to see more organizations do. And even now, like at this point in my career now, when I'm looking for more mid-level roles, that would be helpful too. But certainly when I was new, there are just things that you don't know, and no one's really going to tell you necessarily either, because that transition period is so short. So there are other things you do need to know, and I think that would be helpful to have that institutionalized.
I'll add, if you don't mind, I'll add one more thing to it, as I've had some time to reflect. I think that also companies use mentoring programs for attraction and retention. So to hire an employee and to train them and go through the process and onboard them, it's a very expensive endeavor. It's much, much cheaper to set up a mentoring program and keep employees, retain employees and talent than it is to go and seek out new talent. So that mentorship programs, and as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, it could be for new grads, it could be for women in leadership, whatever it might be. It's really can be an attraction and retention. And also, when you start to look further in the organization, you get a lot of mentorship programs for people that are looking to be put into senior level roles, and as such, and that structure. So yeah, so there's some real cost benefit for companies to run that. Most big multinationals do have a mentorship program of some sort. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no more questions from the audience, that's pretty much all I have. Do either Darcy, Noelle, do you have anything else you want to add? Any words of wisdom, pieces of advice, any last thoughts?
I would just like to reiterate, to anyone watching who's looking for mentors, again, like to really just take that first step to reach out, and be open to that, and also be open to becoming a mentor yourself. You don't have to be super far out in your career to be a mentor. Because even if you're in college, like high school students are looking for mentors, and that can be a really valuable experience for them. So really, you don't need to be at the top of your game yet to be valuable to someone else. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I would say for me, in sum, I would say for me, mentoring is a really, it has been and continues to be one of the highlights of my career. I really enjoy, I do work in the people development space, so I have this natural affinity to helping people. But if you remember back to when you had a really great professor, really great teacher, someone that really made an impact, if you reflect upon it, it could be in grade school, it could have been in middle school or high school, university, and what have you. I think that mentorship relationships are often like that. Like I think about, when you're at a crossroads and someone has helped you and given you ideas and made you think of things that you hadn't thought about before, that to me, how I've received it as a mentee and how I give it as a mentor, it can really make a big difference in someone's life. Potentially, not always, not miracle workers, but it could really make a big difference. And as I said earlier, this is a great opportunity for anyone who's committed to this and really wants to move forward in their career, to take advantage of it. It's people that mentor are giving their time generously and they want to help. So I would say, give it a try. And also, lastly, if the mentorship relationship, as Noelle had shared, and I talked a little bit about, if it's not the right chemistry, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You just find someone else. Don't throw it out. So I'd say, try to find the right person. It's like, you go to a restaurant and you try a dish and you don't like it. Well, you can try something else. You don't have to always eat the same. You don't have to eat the dish you didn't like every time you go. So yeah, try out and see. And actually, from a first relationship, you'll be be able to also sort of understand what you want out of it. And I've worked with people who've never been in a mentoring relationship, and I'm like, well, what do you want? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, that's okay. Let's talk about what so that's okay not to really know. It's just to as Noelle said, just sort of to take that first step and give it a try. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much to both of you. Yeah, I mean, as someone who has been a mentor and also been a mentee, I mean, I think mentoring relationships can be just super supportive and helpful, especially, with having to do with career and, making those sort of like big steps post grad. No one really teaches you that, right? Like that's not necessarily something that you learn in university or you learn in high school. And I feel like there are still a lot of kind of more traditional notions that are pervasive in our society, where not everyone is super transparent or open about certain things, especially having to do with job and career. But those times are changing, right? And so yeah, I think a mentor can just be super helpful, and ultimately someone who you could potentially go back to years from now when you have questions or need advice. So yeah, thank you so much to both of you for joining us on this discussion. I think we covered a lot, and there's a lot of really great information. Yeah, someone says, thank you very much for this webinar. It's been extremely beneficial. Okay, great. Yeah, that's great to hear. And yeah, we will be posting this for more students in our network who weren't able to attend to see. Another plug, if you haven't joined Pitt Commons yet, I would definitely check it out. It just takes a couple minutes to sign up. Pitt Global has a formal mentoring program on there specifically for students who are looking to get into more international and global fields. So if you haven't joined and you're interested in finding a mentor, please check that out. It's under the mentoring programs on Pitt Commons. And yeah, just thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Darcy. Thank you, Noelle.
Great, thank you. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.